Today, I was talking to a couple on a joint Skype call, meaning both of them were on the other end of the screen. And he said that he wanted to learn to be more loving. And I said, instead of the usual, well, that's really nice, because really, I want to be loving doesn't mean very much by itself. I've heard thousands of people say that. I want to be more loving, except if it takes any change on my part. That's what they mean. Less I have to do any work, less I have to be selfless, less I have to listen. So he said, I want to be more loving. And I said, prove it. He said, well, how? So instead of coming up with my own thing, I turned to her and said, Sharon, what would you most like from Rick so you feel loved? She said, well, I would love it if he was less negative. I get that. And it's too vague. Less negative. What does that mean? It's not concrete. How do you judge it? People can't deal with just less negative or more supportive or more kind or more affectionate. Too vague, and it just, as I said in a recent chat, hangs above your head like an ever-present sword. So I said, you mean, would an example be like less critical? She said, well, yeah. So can you give me an example? So she described how earlier in that day, the two of them had been texting, and she had forgotten an appointment or something and concluded the text conversation a little abruptly. That's really common in texting. You're texting somebody and they say, oh, oops, forgot something, I've got to go. Just, welcome to the electronic world. And when she said, I have to go, his answer was, we all have our priorities. And I looked at him and he went, what? I said, there are certain things that just simply cannot be said in a positive way. You cannot be talking to your partner or be referring to her and use, for example, the words stupid and ugly in a positive way. I've just been thinking, and it's just charming how stupid you are. Or ugly. How sweet it is for me to live with you. There's some things you can't say. It doesn't matter if you play these words to the melody of Ode to Joy by Beethoven, it still comes across badly. We all have our priorities. No way to say that nicely. And she said, I felt criticized, which was exactly what we were looking for. Not less negative, but examples of criticism. And he said, well, I didn't mean it that way. Everybody listening has done this. We'll say something critical and negative, then we'll realize, sometimes just unconsciously, oh, shoot, I've been caught. That was critical. And then we go, oh, I was just joking. That's a favorite. I didn't mean it that way. I hear that one all the time. Oh, so you didn't mean to say stupid and ugly. You meant it in the positive way. Yeah, well, see, there isn't one. So I said to him, imagine that I'm trying to arrange a call with you, and you respond that you can't make a call at 3:00 because you have an important business meeting. And I say, well, we all have our priorities. Yeah, true, we do, but we also have our own skin and hair and preferences and thoughts. It's obvious, and it's completely unnecessary to state the obvious. And when we do, it's very often a way of slamming people. So there's really no way that we can talk about that. About we all have our priorities. What it really means is you have misplaced priorities that put me behind everything else. That's called a euphemism, which means making a bad thing sound good. And another example of euphemism is, somebody bobbles a ball in the infield playing baseball. They drop it, they get an error, the guy gets to first base, and one of his teammates turns to him and goes, really nice catch. Well, the words are really nice catch, just like you said, well, we have our priorities, true, but it's snotty. And the baseball player knows it, and so do you. And then he said, after I said all that, he said, you're right. which I was not expecting, frankly. He said, "You're right. I did mean it that way." Well, bless his heart. And I said to him, in your defense, it was not conscious. You didn't think about it and say, I could conclude this conversation with, "I love you, hugs and kisses, you're sweetie." No, instead I'll say, "Well, we all have our priorities." No, it was just unconscious on your part. But I looked at her and said, how did it feel to hear him say that he admitted that he did mean it in a negative way, that he was criticizing you? And she said, relieved. Because, see, she's in all of their marriage, never heard him own up to a mistake when he speaks in that way. He attacks and then goes, "I didn't mean it that way." Or he says some sarcastical thing to her and he goes, "Oh, you can't take a joke." So he's been excusing his attacks all of their marriage. And for the first time after being married for 30 something years, he says, "Yeah, I was a jerk and that's how I meant it." And I said to both of them, what he just did was pretty great. He overstated his criticism, and you are understating his response just now. In other words, you're not quite appreciating how incredible it is that he just admitted his mistake. She said, "Well, let me give it another try. I'm thrilled to hear the truth." Yes. See, this is how people can really have conversations, when somebody can help them understand what it's like when you bring loving to a situation or a conversation or a person or a relationship, like we've been talking about over and over again. Beautiful. New subject. I wrote this before I started reading an email from a 50-year-old woman who has a tendency to see the darkness and pain and the difficulties in everything. If you tell her there's ice cream, she says it'll melt. If you say it's sunny, she says, well, it's going to be hot. If we're in the city, well, she feels closed in. If we're in the country, then there's nothing to do. I wrote this. I said, we become how we think. I don't know what prompted me to write it, but I did. We really do. It's a proven truth. And we really have a choice about how we think. When we're afraid and in pain, our choices are more limited. But we do have a choice once we've felt loved. So let's see how your thoughts are today. Now I remember the context. I wrote all this. I pulled up her email and I wrote this before I read her email. So I kind of had a feel for what she was going to talk about before I even started. We choose how we think and we feel. Then I started reading the email. She said, I'm feeling sad, alone, depressed, and having suicidal thoughts. Interesting that I would do the introduction like this. I am not saying that you shouldn't feel this way, not criticizing. I am saying that how you think determines how you feel. And this amount of self-indulgence in horrible thoughts will make happiness utterly impossible. Really. You're sad about what? You have a network of people to love you that you never before thought possible. In the last year, your life has just changed with people who love you. You're sad that your ex-boyfriend isn't around because she talks about that a lot. When he was around, you forget that you complained about him constantly. You're sad about living in the particular location where she is, the state and city. Darling, you're sad no matter where you are. It's not about being alone in a particular place, about not having your boyfriend. It's not about circumstances. It's not about the weather. Your sadness is all generated within you because of the pain of the past. You say you're alone. Gotta be kidding. I've detailed how you're not alone so many times. I'm not going to repeat it here because she has so many friends and people who care about her and write to her and talk to her and call her and Skype her. You say you're depressed only because you indulge the first two. sad and alone. If I sat around all day long and just went, I'm so sad, I'm so alone, I'm sad, I'm alone, and I did that all day long, I'm telling you, by the end of the day, I'd be depressed. And that's what you do to yourself. When it turns out that the first two, sad and alone, aren't even true. So it's a self-imposed prison. You continue. I had to go for a doctor's visit today and came back home so tired, I had to take a 2-hour nap. So you choose to give in to the exhaustion. Really, you went for a doctor's visit, and I happen to know what kind of doctor, and you were exhausted by what? The doctor didn't have you run a marathon and then, check your heartbeat. He didn't do a treadmill test. Exhausted, the travel, he was 10 miles away. Not long ago, I flew from China to Atlanta and then straight to Sweden, like boom, boom, boom. 18 time zones. I'm an old man and I wasn't exhausted, much older than you. I'm not saying something good about myself. I'm saying it's your thinking that weighs you down, not a trip to the doctor's office or the 10 miles you had to drive to get there or sitting in the waiting room. What could possibly be exhausting about that and cause a 2-hour nap? It is true that you were taught to think that way, but now you've been taught and loved, and you're still choosing the old ways. Your mother was exhausted when she'd get up out of bed in the morning, so she had to fall back into bed to rest from getting up out of bed. You can see where this would end. And you learned that from her. You learned that there was an excuse for feeling sad, alone, exhausted, and depressed all the time. So you use these excuses. I'm not saying you mean to, but you do. You continue. Maybe the exhaustion is from all the travel. So turns out that in the last, several weeks, she has traveled to and from 3 contiguous, connected states in the eastern United States, which are compared to the western United States like nothing. They're like counties in the western United States. She says, so that could be a part of the icky feeling I have. It does make a big difference for me. Not really, no. Not travel between Connecticut and Rhode Island, which I could do on my artificial knees, probably on my hands and knees. These are tiny little distances, and you're looking for reasons to feel exhausted, sad, alone, and depressed. And if you look, you can find them. It does make a difference for a few minutes to travel, but then you complain that your body aches from the exercise. You complain about exercising. You complain about not exercising. Oh, sorry, I left this part out. It wouldn't have made sense to you. She talked about traveling, and then she said, I have not exercised for over a week. So that could be part of the icky feeling that I have. I skipped a line. Yeah, not exercising can make a difference for a little bit, but when you do exercise, you complain. So when you don't exercise, you complain. When you do exercise, you complain. When you travel, you complain. When you don't travel, you complain. When you're in one state, you complain. When you're in the next state, you complain. When you travel across country, well, then you complain a lot because, that involves being in an airplane and sitting on your backside for, 3 or 4 hours. There's always a reason to be unhappy. If you want to look for them, you're going to find them. You continue. My ex-boyfriend calls me from time to time, and it feels good to talk to him. And I see how he's wanting something from me. He's not really loving me for me, but for what he can take from me. Comfort, companionship, somebody that will listen to him. Yeah, and it's comfort you get from him. Like eating while watching television. He uses you in the same way. If you're satisfied with comfort, well, that's your business. You get to make that choice. But you can't keep going for comfort and be happy. Comfort is the opposite of happy. It makes you satisfied and then you stop. Whereas looking for happiness is a never-ending journey. It's an adventure. It's exciting. And you keep settling for the comfort of simple companionship instead of real relationship. You settle for less pain, no job, victimhood, and complaining instead of having a real life. You continue. I'm isolated and alone. Complete foolishness to say such a thing. You make yourself alone. I've personally given you lots of people to connect with, people who really care about you. I've read their emails and heard about their Skype calls with you. You couldn't possibly be isolated and alone, but you've decided to think that you are, so you are. You think that if there's not somebody actually physically touching you, and this is a very common misconception, you're alone. Wrong. Probably the most alone people ever feel is when they're in a room with people who don't really clearly see them and care about them. You've had all the people in your life who have been there with you physically, parents, kids, boyfriends, for 50 years, and you're not happy. So clearly, being in the same room with somebody, being with a companion who touches you, hasn't worked. Now you have unconditional love people to talk to all over the place, so you are not isolated. This is an example of changing your thoughts. You sit there and go, and I've heard you do it. You do an impression of Eeyore that is stunning. I'm so alone. Well, but that's not true. So if you see that it's not true, then the feelings that follow, feeling alone, feeling pain, feeling unloved, would disappear. But you keep repeating thoughts that just flat are not true. You continue and say, is there anything else you can see that I'm not doing? I did laugh out loud at that point. Yeah, like, let's see, get a job. Now you've been putting off getting a job and talking about how you want a job, just like the man that we just talked about who says, I want to be more loving, but then he doesn't do anything to be more loving. I can't count how many people say, oh, I really want to get a job. What they mean is they want a recruiter from a really top company to come to their house in a limousine, take them to the company, give them a desk, pay them a lot of money, not require any work from them, give them a house, give them medical insurance, dental insurance, and then they're taken care of for the rest of their life. That's what they mean by I want a job. Not I have to actually look for one and work hard. That's not what they mean at all. They just want all the benefits of having a job. So get a job right now. Make getting a job. Make that your primary occupation. That's going to really increase your level of responsibility. And happy, you just talked about being depressed, comes from feeling loved. We talked about how you're not isolated. You have lots of people who care about you. Being loving, we'll get to that in a minute, and being responsible. Right now, you're not doing any of them. So you call the people who love you, you get a job, which contributes to being responsible, doing anything. I couldn't possibly count how many people have said to me, I can't find a job. And yet I know people who, once they're told, get a job. I know people who have had 20 jobs in the last 5 years, easily, without any requirement for a resume because they've quit every job prior to that, which proves that there are jobs out there begging for people to fill them. These people have had 20 jobs in just a few years. So there's got to be a lot of jobs that don't require much in the way of preparation. So you can find one somewhere. Don't care where, don't care what it is. It will increase your sense of worth, usefulness, happiness. Do volunteer work. Now we talked about loved, loving, and responsible. Loving. Volunteer work gives you a chance to do that. I know a lady who has been corresponding with you regularly who sent you an entire website of volunteer jobs that are all marked as possible to do remotely. So you can do them from your home, these jobs. And yet you haven't gotten one of them. None. So loved, loving, and responsible. And so far you have everything you need to do them, and you're not doing it. So it's not a mystery why you feel alone and miserable and depressed. You're choosing it, not intentionally, but you are. So get a job, do volunteer work, stop complaining. Why? Because I'm tired of you complaining? Nah, not at all. Because it's killing you. Because the complaining negative thoughts that you have turn into reality and completely determine how you feel. Next step, stop complaining. Next step, stop complaining. It's killing you, honey. You use complaining like a drug, and until you stop it completely, all the way, like any addiction, you will be drugged up all the time. You continue. I have a vocational rehabilitation meeting at 2:00, but it probably won't do any good. In your defense, you hadn't read Stop Complaining 3 times before you said this. How about if you went in there into the vocational rehabilitation people whose entire job is to help you get one, with the attitude that you'll do whatever they tell you because you've been there before, and you come out simply saying, well, I don't like everything that they said. Well, I'll bet you don't, because if you did everything that they said, you'd actually have a job, and then you'd have to work, and you'd actually have to be responsible and accountable. You really don't want to be. You want to sit still and complain as you were taught to do from the time you were a child. I am not blaming you. This was done to you as a child. But see, the people who caused this aren't going to fix it for you. You have to. So if you go in there with the attitude you'll do whatever they tell you, you'll exert yourself to have something to do within the next 2 weeks. Imagine what could happen. You can hardly conceive of that because you're already telling yourself before you even go there that it's impossible. Well, then it will be. I hear that all the time. Well, I can't do that. Well, then you're right. Henry Ford once said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. That's pretty wise for a guy who was actually pretty people unfriendly. But we become what we think. You're not my first rodeo, kid. I've done this before. When people really want something, they prove it by moving mountains to do it. When people simply say they want a thing and it never happens, they didn't really want it, really. You smoke pot, sit around in your apartment or house in the country, you play with your ex-boyfriend and complain. That is not moving mountains. That will not get you a job. That will not help you be responsible. It won't help you feel loved or loving, and it won't help you be happy. You say, sometimes I just think of throwing in the towel with real love. Seems like no matter how much time and effort I put into it, I don't get anywhere. So what the blank blank am I not doing? Listen to the answer. Everything. You're not doing everything that's been described to you. Or another way, not doing anything. It depends on how you phrase that clause. You're going through the motions. You talk about it, but you're not really doing it. Get a job, be connected, be happy. You're not doing any of those things. You conclude by saying, some real love people lately have told me that I'm not really doing my work. Well, bless their hearts, because you're not. But I talked to my friends, and you named 2 of them, X and Y, we'll call them, and they both said that they find me to be very much in my heart, very open-hearted. Darling, you justify being in your head by quoting 2 people who I happen to know, who live in their heads. And so here are 2 people who live in their heads and are similarly unhappy and irresponsible and not loving and don't feel loved. And they confirm that everything that you're doing is right because that's exactly what they do. Loved, loving, and responsible. You're not doing those things, and your friends aren't either. So their opinion of how you're doing is worth nothing. No harshness to this, kid. If you don't do anything that I've suggested, my life will be the same. Yours will not. New subject. This is about a woman and her 19-year-old son. Sometimes people disconnect, and I'm talking about everybody who's listening, when they hear situations that don't exactly apply to them. So when some people who are listening right now might say, well, this doesn't apply to me because I don't have a 19-year-old son. This is about interacting with people. pretty much, not perfectly, but every example of interacting with somebody that I talk about during a video chat applies to 90% of the people who are listening. No kidding. So I say, somebody from Afghanistan, well, you don't have to live in Afghanistan to be interacting with people. I have a 4-year-old child. You may not have a 4-year-old child, but I'll bet you that you have a 4-year-old coworker. So all this stuff applies to all of us. This is about being true to ourselves. There's always something for us to learn as we talk about anybody else. So she has a 19-year-old son. We'll call him Trevor, who didn't finish high school. And for 3 years, he's lived in the basement, playing video games, watching porn, smoking pot, living with his girlfriend, being grossly disrespectful of his mother. I mean, saying things to her that I'm pretty sure I never thought about my mother, contributing to the world about as much as a crack in the sidewalk. If the mother really kicks up a fuss, I mean, just goes to town and says, I'm going to kick you out of the house if you don't get a job, then he'll actually go get one, which proves what I was telling the woman right before this. She was saying, well, I just can't find a job. Oh, if this 19-year-old pot smoking, living in the basement, playing video games kid can just go out and get a job when his mother's mad at him, so can she. Well, so he goes out and he gets a job if she really makes a fuss, but then all she has said is go out and get a job. So the kid's pretty smart. He does exactly that. He goes out and gets one, does nothing to keep it. So then he doesn't show up at work. He did what she said. He got the job. He doesn't show up at work. And then he's really surprised that when he doesn't show up for his first and second days of work, they tell him to not bother to come back. They fire him. Well, what a gig. He has everything provided. And all he has to do is periodically find a job and get fired. This is really quite a deal. She asked me what to do. And I said, throw him out. It's for his good. He's not learning to be responsible. He's not learning to be loving. He's not learning to be a human being. He just plays video games. She asked, well, throw him out when? I said, give him a week at most. A week as in starting right now at 4 p.m, and a week from today at 4 p.m. So she writes, my son is telling me that he has nowhere to go. I've heard this before. And he'll have to live in his car. I mean, the tears by now are just falling from my face because I've heard all of this stuff. When a kid is thrown out of his house, it turns out he can always find another place to go. Mom continues, I told him I just don't know what to tell him because, if he'd have to live in his car, I don't know if I could live with that. Yeah, honey, that's exactly why he told you that, was to get you to back down. He's had all this time to prepare. He's 19 years old. He's had 19 years to prepare to have a place of his own. For the last 3 years, he's been out of high school and played video games and smoked pot and lived with his girlfriend in the basement. How could it get lazier than that? And you've told him what he needs to do, but then you don't do anything if he ends right back in the basement. So why wouldn't he do nothing? You've taught him to do nothing. Now you're trying to teach him to do something. But words don't matter at this point, not at all. He's learned to ignore your words, that you don't mean it. He thinks of you kind of as a joke. Only consequences will teach. Words have already failed. If he has to live in his car, I would be just tickled. It actually tickles me when kids say, well, I'm going to have to live in my car, or I'll be homeless. And I go, great. Then maybe you'll be motivated to get a job and save. Yeah? So if you let him stay with you, he'll stay there. And then he'll be 45 and you'll be wondering why you have this 45-year-old game-playing, pot-smoking kid in your basement. He's proven that that's what he'll do. Now, this has to be done kindly. This isn't done harshly, but with no room for misunderstanding or manipulating. The date is 1 week from today. Out by 4 p.m., because that's the time that I wrote this, or you move his stuff into the driveway, if necessary, in the rain. See how clear that is? This is going to happen at 4 o'clock a week from today. If it's raining, you don't get a reprieve. So if you don't want your stuff to get rained on, I would suggest you move your stuff yourself before it's raining. See? Easy. You're going to discover that he'll work plenty to save his Xbox from being rained on, but not to show up at work. He's, in fact, very careful with this Xbox, I promise you. And with the joystick and the game controller and all the stuff that he uses to play with, I'll bet he doesn't let anybody even touch it. So he knows what to protect, but he's learned that you'll do everything else. This is called loving him. Loved, loving, responsible. Loved and loving are going to take a while. The only thing you can really start with right now is responsible. So then, baby, that's where we start. You continue. He says his girlfriend won't have a place to stay if he has to leave. Well, that is truly heartbreaking because all of her choices have led her not just into her own parents' basement, but now into yours. Well, not exactly your problem. You continue. I genuinely don't know what to say. I can tell that. I feel conflicted. I'm looking forward to his moving out, but I don't want him to be homeless either. I've done this uncounted times with other adult children. Very often being homeless is the only thing that will motivate people to really work and get a place to live. Just like a heart attack is very often the only thing that motivates people to stop smoking, for example, because it saves their lives. You must not be afraid of his homelessness. If you're afraid of it, he'll sense it and he'll hold you hostage with that fear. You can't be afraid at all. And if we have to talk till you're not, fine. You need to recover from feeling worthless. Just sort of parenthetically, she'd already made plans to come here so that she could learn not to feel worthless. And your son makes you feel small. So he's actually harming himself and he's harming you because he makes you feel small and worthless because you can't follow up and you can't direct your own child, which has to feel pretty bad. So he has no mother. He just has a caretaker, somebody who provides him a home. So it turns out it's actually loving to throw him out. People have a hard time with that. How is it loving? Because as it is now, he's going to turn into just a blob. And then when mom dies, he's going to be homeless living under a bridge. It's more loving to throw him out now so he can learn to feel loved and become loving and be responsible and be a human being. You teach him responsibility and you become stronger and create the possibility of learning to love him. Everybody wins. It's loving to throw him out. Just as it's very often loving to tell a very young child, no. Because what little children want isn't what they need. A loving parent says no. Now, we don't say no unnecessarily, but we don't hesitate to. If he were serious about finding a place, he'd have done it before now. He was just fired from a job a week ago. So why should you believe that he'll keep this one? Because he's promising, I'll get a job. Well, we've already seen where that goes. If you let him stay home, he'll have no reason to behave at work and keep the job. So you're thinking, well, I'll let him get a job and then he'll save money for... No, he's already proven he won't do that. If you kick him out, he'll be instantly motivated and you won't feel like you're a worthless pushover. Got to happen. You say, I'm not sure what to say or do right now. Maybe he could stay longer and I could get his paychecks. I could get his paychecks and then give him spending money. Then I could help him find a place he can afford. Is this plan wrong? Yes, it's wrong. Because you've already let him slide over and over. So let's say you keep his checks, but what good does it do that you keep his checks if he doesn't show up at work and there are no checks? Get it? Because that's what he'll do. It's what he's been doing in the past. There's no check to manage. Again, if you throw him out, he'll live. He won't die. If you let him stay, he kind of emotionally does die. She wrote a second email and said, He doesn't really make me feel guilty. I make myself feel guilty, right? She's been thinking. Yes. She says, I just told him that he had to move out. Oh, bless you. And he was genuinely surprised. Well, of course. I assumed that he would have a place to go, but he doesn't. So, 1, he's surprised because you've never required him to pay the consequences of his choices. So this time he thought he could slide again, proving what I talked about earlier. And 2, you really have no idea whether he has a place to live, because I've seen this over and over again. Oh, I've got no place to go. And the day to throw him out arrives and poof, their friends take them in. Now, of course, their friends eventually get sick of this kid being irresponsible too, and they'll throw him out. But in the end, he'll be motivated to get a job because people don't put up with slackers and leeches for long in their home. You say he sees now, after looking at the price of rent, and that I'm very serious about this, that he needs to leave, but he's not prepared. Again, he's had plenty of chance to prepare. He just didn't think you were serious this time. But now you can't back out, or he will never, ever believe you again. I haven't spoken with him since yesterday, you say. I feel like I want to allow him till September 1st to move out. At the time this was written, that was like 3 months from then. This will be contingent on the rules I set. The paycheck comes to me, he gets money for groceries, she gives a bunch of rules. And my response is, oh, you're so sweet. You're darling, but he's way cleverer than you. He's proven with his behavior, and that's all that matters. What he's going to do and what his intent is. He's proven that he doesn't respect you. He speaks in ways to you that he would never speak to his friends. He's proven that he doesn't respect your place. He thinks he has a right to do whatever he wants, smokes pot, plays games, has his girlfriend living with him, and more. He's proven that with his behavior, that he doesn't take keeping a job seriously. He was just recently fired for the who knows how manyth time. He's proven that he's utterly irresponsible with his behavior. And he's proven that he doesn't take getting a job seriously. He would have found something before he did, but he didn't really try as hard as he could. If you let him stay now, he will put it off until the last second. And then September 1, because I know you, will turn into October 1, because, see, of course, he won't have a place to stay and he won't have a job. And on and on. And that's how we get 45-year-old, well, I was going to say men, but really 45-year-old boys, little boys, who live in the basement. He knows how to play you. If he has to camp out or live in a car, great. Many other people have done it before him and lived. You can do it, kid. New subject. This is from a mother whose child is Zoe, who's 3 years old. She said, today on the way out from Walmart, I asked Zoe if she wanted a bouncy ball from one of those vending machines, you know, the kind that are at the exit or entrance of a store, because the kids congregate there and say, please, please. And then the parents give them a quarter. So she wanted a bouncy ball. And no, I asked her if she wanted a bouncy ball. She said, yeah, and got really excited. And then I realized I only had one quarter, and of course it takes 2. So we left without the ball. And Zoe was surprisingly okay. She said, okay, Mommy, next time I'll remind you to bring quarters so we can get a ball. That's pretty brilliant. And I'd bet you $100 that she'll forget to clean her room, but she will remember the 2 quarters. I can make a promise to my grandkids, not see them for 6 months, and I'll walk in the door and they'll remind me the promise I made 6 months before. They're pretty good at that. So I forgot. Yeah, it doesn't work. So the mom says to Zoe, yeah, I thought you and Eve, that's her sister, would have fun playing with a ball. And Zoe said, but maybe I only want to share it with myself because I really like bouncy balls. This is a very common thing for kids to say. Well, but I want it just for me. So mom says, well, then I'll bring just enough quarters for you and Eve to each get one. Or, come to think of it, maybe we'll just get one and give it to Eve. Mom says, it would have been so easy not to say that. But at this point, I'm actually intentionally probing because I know this is an issue that needs addressing with Zoe. It's actually very clever of you. Parents, the point of this is that teaching opportunities for your kids are everywhere if you look for them. Zoe responds, well, but I need one too, because I really want one. Notice, this is exactly what mom was trying to provoke. If this 3-year-old child wants something, she turns that into needing something. Mom knew this was going to happen. Mom says, no, Zoe, you really don't. You have plenty of toys that Eve doesn't have. And she really likes balls. So mom's making it pretty clear to Zoe, I think now it's becoming increasingly a good idea to give the ball to your sister, who's much younger. Zoe is now fussing. But I don't have a bouncy ball. I only have 2 soccer balls. I need more toys. Zoe doesn't realize that she's just fallen right straight into a minefield. Mom is brilliant to point out that not only could Zoe not get a ball, but because of her selfishness, perhaps only her sister would get one. Mom says, I had to try hard not to laugh at that. We were just about to go to the store, another store, to get Zoe some paint and stickers that I'd been promising her for quite a while. And I wanted to get her that stuff because we discovered that she can play by herself for much longer when she has enough art supplies. So everybody wanted to take Zoe to the store to get art supplies. But mom says, Zoe, what you're doing right now is called being ungrateful. You're saying all the toys you have at home are not enough. Mom gave Zoe plenty of clue, but Zoe didn't get it. She said, they're not enough. I need more. So Zoe's tightening the noose around her neck. And this just made me laugh out loud. She actually believes what she's saying. This 3-year-old actually believes that she has a need, like for, air for more toys, just like adults who are demanding in the same ways. Adults may not demand bouncy balls, but they have demands for an unending list of things that they don't really need. They want them, but they call it a need. Mom says, if you're not happy with the toys you already have, you will not be happy with anything new. So I'm going to help you with this. So we're not going to buy anything else until you learn how to be happy with the toys you have. She says Zoe's now speaking a kind of pathetic whine because she knows she's not supposed to fuss. And she knows that I really mean it now. But Mommy, I need paint, remember? And stickers. I need my toys. I can't be happy without them. This sounds silly. This is how adults behave. I really need it. I really need to get my way. I really need to be right. I really need to be angry. Constantly. So Mom says I drive past the store where we'd originally planned to go to get the stickers and paint, and I go straight home and park in front of the house. And I say, just like you can get addicted to movies and treats, you can get addicted to toys. Because, see, Mom's explained addictions to the kids before. Adults can become addicted to shopping. You can become addicted to shopping, but that never makes us happy. Then Mom asks the golden question, what makes us happy? Well, they've gone over this enough times that Zoe knows the answer. Love makes us happy. Dang, I wish I could get Zoe to teach some adults this. Mom says, right. So you already have many wonderful toys that you enjoy playing with. We live in a great house with a great playground. We have food every day. We watch movies that you like. Daddy works hard to make money for all of this. It all costs money. Zoe looks like her mind is blown because she says, movies cost money? Little kids don't think in terms of their parents having to work hard to provide them these things. Priceless. We really have to teach them this stuff. I know 20-year-old kids living at home who have never considered once that the place they live isn't provided free by fairies. They've never considered that their parents work for a roof and house insurance and fire insurance and health insurance, and it just goes on and on and on. When kids go out into the real world, they go, I had no idea how much it costs just to live. No kidding. So Zoe said, movies cost money? Mom said, yeah, they do. Wow, says Zoe. So mom says, tell me 10 things you already have you're grateful for. And mom says, I was thinking about toys. And Zoe said, 10? I don't have 10, maybe like 1. Mom says, well, then tell me 1. Well, Zoe rises to the challenge. No, I'll say 10. Mom said, how about some of the things we just bought? She said, oh, like the goldfish we just got. That's goldfish, the cracker, not the fish. And I like the princess soap. So Mom starts counting on her fingers. Great, that's 2. Now they're still sitting in the parked car in front of the apartment. Zoe says, trees, I'm grateful for trees. Now this is better than I planned, Mom says, because it's not toys. And she goes on to list friends that she's grateful for. And by this time, she's laughing and having a great time. I didn't mean to put these two together, the lady who couldn't find a job and Zoe, but notice it's the same thing. Zoe was stuck in negative thinking, and what did Mom do? Talk about the things you're grateful for or the things you could do that change your thoughts. Mom did this with a 3-year-old as I'm doing with a 50-year-old. And the 3-year-old and the 50-year-old are relatively the same in level of responsibility. So she goes on to list friends that she's grateful for, and she's laughing and having a wonderful time. And Mom says, how are you feeling right now? And 3-year-old Zoe makes a happy face. Apparently there's a little standard happy face in their family, meaning that I like it. Mom says, how did you feel when I said you couldn't have the bouncy ball? She made a grumpy face. I'm in tears. This is beautiful. This is loving and teaching. She is so capable of learning. Mom says, you still don't have the bouncy ball, but you're happy. This is called being grateful. What a lesson that she teaches a 3-year-old that where she had previously thought, much like the 50-year-old, that she couldn't possibly be happy unless she had her way. Mom has taught her that, yes, look at you. You are happy because you're grateful for what you have, and you still don't have the bouncy ball. So Mom starts the car up and backs up like she's heading out the driveway to go somewhere. And Zoe says, where are we going? And Mom says, well, now that you're happy, we can go get you some paint. As long as you're already happy, well, then we can have some fun. When you're grumpy, we have to deal with that first. This is Hall of Fame loving and teaching. This is what parenting is. This is Hall of Fame learning on the part of the 3-year-old. All of this is possible only because of what Mom says now. She says, I avoided extreme consequences with Zoe for as long as I could. But now that I know that they're all she responds to, I can use them. Before, I was hesitant to have her actually miss a meal. Now, Mom's describing now what happened before this incident with the bouncy ball. It used to be that I was afraid to have this 3-year-old miss a meal, and so I never imposed a consequence like that because she's so tiny and toddlers need food so constantly. But I decided if that's what it takes, then fine. And after missing 3 meals, that doesn't mean 3 in a row, 3 meals on different days, because she didn't get ready fast enough to show up for dinner, she finally responds when I ask her to do something. After getting harnessed to her bed, those little child harnesses you take kids in, where you chain them up to this harness so that you can walk them around in a mall. Essentially, it's a dog walker, but for kids. After getting harnessed to her bed the entire night, about 14 times, she finally stopped getting out of bed and waking everybody up in the house and making them sleep deprived all the next day. And she stopped being afraid of bedtime. Once she understood that I meant it with the consequences, she quit being afraid of the dark. She doesn't use her nightlight anymore. The consistency is soothing to her. This is gorgeous. You did it. You really did it. It's stunning. My whole head is smiling. Consistency for a child is like swaddling a baby. It's comfort. It's order. It's banishment of chaos. Why do you think kids become demanding? Because they're trying to control the chaos. Mom says, I can actually have conversations with her now, and she listens. It's now that I've used consistent consequences. If you use them half the time, you just will not use them at all. Now that I do that, it's like having a human being in the house instead of a whiny toddler. I have so much more hope for our relationship and for the school year. And I'm more appreciative of what you said before, how lucky Zoe is, that meaning me. I've told her that Zoe's lucky to have her as a mother. And now Mom is saying, you're right. Nobody could handle this kid. Even when it's not important life lessons, she's dying to be taught and told stories to all the time, and I'm glad I'm her mother. To every parent, you really are indispensable. You're saving lives. You're not just teaching a child to show up to the dinner table on time or to go to bed and stay there. You're creating the next generation. You're saving the world. You want world peace? Teach a child. You want global warming to stop? Teach a child. Really. Which makes much more difference in the long run than, say, recycling. Teaching our children is what's going to save them and save the world. No exaggeration. New subject. The man was a bit frenetic as he was trying to accomplish 10 things at once. His mind was revved up. His partner said something to him, not really important what, and in his hurry, he answered her, but he realized that he had a bit of an edge in his voice because he was rushed and trying to do everything at one time and impatient. His voice was just a little clipped, not loving. It wasn't that he was angry. It was just not loving. And that's the time to do something. This is the thing to notice. Anything not loving. Don't wait till you're angry. You're 8 steps too late. Much too far off the road to recover by then. You're on a mountain road and you feel your car turning at a 45-degree angle. Yeah, that's not the time to turn your wheels and try to get back on the road. You're going to fall off the mountain. Same thing with anger. Catch it early, not loving. So this man thought, that wasn't very loving to speak in a clipped way, and I don't like feeling not loving. Now, this is just in his head. She spoke to him again, his partner, and this time he stopped what he was doing and he responded to her in a loving way. This is how we learn best. And we've talked about this. Choose, which also includes the action attendant to the choice. Choose, observe, learn, repeat. Choose, observe, learn, repeat. You do that over and over again all day long, and you will get wiser, smarter, gain capacity in everything that you do this with. He chose. He then observed. He chose badly. He chose to use a clipped voice with his partner. He observed that it wasn't loving and that he didn't like the feeling. That's called learning. Then he chose again, this time differently, because he had learned, like as in really learned, not just in his head. Then he finished the other 3 steps. He chose, he observed, and he learned that he liked how he felt when he chose more wisely. Notice when he made his mistake, he didn't feel bad about himself. He didn't beat himself up. He didn't apologize all over the place. None of those is choose, observe, learn, and repeat. He didn't promise he'd never do it again. He didn't say, I shouldn't. He just chose, observed, learned, and repeated the process. We don't have to do all that beating stuff. We need to take steps that actually make a difference. And as we do, our whole lives change. Our whole lives are made up of itty-bitty little choices. And our choices are vastly changed as we simply ask a few questions before we make our choices. How would my life be different? How would my relationship be different? How would this situation be different if I simply introduced love into this moment instead of all the other things that are available to me, the things that I was taught in the past, the things that are natural reactions? If I introduce love, everything changes for the better. It's a guarantee. We'll see you in a week.